sort of an impromptu video, but I figured that it might be a way to help me express my thoughts a little bit more coherently than like on Twitter or Instagram or something. Basically, what today's episode of Goblin ASMR will be about is just NFTs and their effect on art, because oftentimes when I'm having a conversation with someone who is on the fence or is sort of pro NFTs, I lose my train of thought. So I'd rather, just be able to talk my shit without anybody like screaming at me. I feel like it's important to sort of define what I believe an NFT to be before we have any real conversation about it. An NFT is a non-fungible token, which means that it is a facet or any sort of form of digital media. So it can be a picture or a video game or a song or anything. And in that regard, it is a pretty creative tool. And I think that if non-fungible tokens were not being sold as a means to create this artificial scarcity for digital work, they could maybe have the potential to produce really interesting things and create value for digital processes that aren't related to artwork. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Basically, an NFT is a way of marking a digital file and submitting it to a blockchain in a way that makes it so only one person within that blockchain is considered to be the sole owner of that content. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, like with a traditional art market, where the owner of an artwork never has to display the work that they get, that because everybody that's participant in the blockchain can witness the work of art in question. So it's not really about exclusiveness. It's more about just the creation of artificial, and I want to sort of reinforce that point, artificial scarcity. Artificial, the best way I can describe it is honestly from video games and trading card games, where you have the reason why an economy like the Team Fortress 2 economy works is that there is an artificial scarcity from that was just created by the creators of that game. Or like with Pokemon, how there is increasingly rare cards that are harder to find. I guess, what else is there to an NFT? I see a pretty common argument about how certain works of art that would be if they weren't an NFT and if they were just a private patronage from one independent buyer to an artist, that there was like a private commission or something like that. And that by relying on NFT technology, there is a greater democratization of art. I think that this is a really moot point, though, for a couple reasons. First and foremost, the amount of people who have access to Ethereum or any sort of similar cryptocurrency is hypothetically egalitarian, but I think in practice, only a small amount of the world population actually has access to these forms of currency. And that, though cryptocurrency is sold as a decentralizing force, I think that it only brings power to the centers of power that already exist. And I think that's sort of also why NFTs are so problematic, because there is this belief that they're somehow going to revolutionize or change the way that we perceive art, and, that it'll somehow be innovative. But the concepts that NFTs rely on to produce value, like the idea of ownership, and an artwork having an aura of original authenticity, are concepts that are extremely retrograde, and that art theorists have long, for a very long time, discredited as being real within the confines of the modern means of producing art. I think about works like In the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, which pretty much totally destroyed the notion that original artworks have any sort of level of aura or authenticity than any of their duplicates. Or that by the presence of near perfect duplicates, there is a increasing degradation of the power of the original. And I think to a lot of people, this seems like a pretty bad sort of idea, but it's actually something that has produced a lot of good in the art world and a lot of decentralization, if we want to use the values of those who care about blockchain and cryptocurrency. It is a greater decentralizing force to not regard the original work of art so highly. It also, just in general, the idea that of, authorial intent versus the actual reception of an artwork, which is oftentimes more important for discerning the effect that the art has on the world, is sort of completely negated by the idea of an NFT, which reinforces the idea of authorial intent with all forms of artwork, because it just by reinforcing the idea that there could be an original work of art that has no other like it, it reinforces the idea that the author is more important than the receiver or the viewer, which I think is extremely ignorant to how art actually works, and it is dangerous because it fully in discussing NFTs is the matter of the environmental impact of NFTs, or at least the environmental impact of minting an NFT. I'm no specialist with understanding how exactly a blockchain or a cryptocurrency works. What I do know is that the idea, the minting process that all cryptocurrency has been attempting to move towards has been delayed for many years, and that Ethereum, ever since its inception, has been trying to incorporate this more environmental friendly form of minting and checking the authenticity of the blockchain, but that there has really been no actual movement or attempt on the owners of Ethereum to actually do that. I think in a lot of people's minds, that sort of form of checking the authenticity of cryptocurrency is a more utopian thing, even in the minds of people who are supportive, or I guess sort of on the fence when it comes to NFTs, that in a way where I think that it will never actually be implemented. Another argument I've seen about, or I think a misconception rather, about NFTs is the idea that the trademark and the copyright of a work of art is somehow traded or given or bestowed upon those who buy the NFT. And this just simply is not true. In fact, the legality behind NFTs is incredibly murky because of how novel they are. And I think that the belief that somehow that they are legal is sort of insidious, because it implies that there is a system in place that manages this process, but there isn't. I think that there is great room for legislation on this matter to control these markets. Again, if you're a finance bro or like sort of a libertarian leaning person, you wouldn't any sort of participation in government in order to regulate this market. I think the problem is that the governments have already squarely cornered the market on blockchain, and probably will also do that with NFTs. Because what sort of, what's stopping a museum from buying an NFT? Nothing. And that, I think over time, NFTs will slowly show themselves to be greater proponents of the powers that be, rather than some new techno-futurist sort of evolution of artwork. I also think, and this is more of a conspiracy theory than anything, that slowly over time, if NFTs are given the center stage within the art market, I think that it will slowly erase the need for the original artists entirely. The reason behind this is because NFTs rely on their value, as their value comes from the pretty much that they will increase in value, because that's just what most cryptocurrencies are intended to do. Or I don't know if they're intended to do, but that's a lot of intention of those who utilize cryptocurrency as a means of investment. And so the people, the patrons of these NFTs, are going to focus less and less about the actual artistic product, because again, NFTs don't have to be artistic products. They're again, the more important thing for someone who's looking to buy an NFT is honestly how much money can be made off of them. And initially, that will be reliant on sort of the social clout of the artist that makes the NFT. Over time, however, I think this process will become more and more refined and streamlined, because, of course, it's going to be, we live in this very hyper-capitalist society. And eventually, what is going to happen is that there will be such intense deadlines and such intense demand for NFTs, especially if they become extremely normalized, especially if they become a successful part of the art market, that those who are seeking to make a profit, or basically just every single patron of an NFT, will want to create works of art that are most easily consumed, or that have the highest level of aesthetic value. And I think that putting this valorization of art is really stupid, because there's a lot of artwork that relies on its incompetence in order for it to be taken seriously. What's going to happen, and this is a process that is already happening, is that AI that will be designed in order to produce images that have the maximum potential aesthetic value, which really means the maximum potential profitability, and that artists who create art in an attempt to have any sort of impact on the world, basically any artist who seeks more than just the aesthetic appreciation of their own art, which I would consider to be the majority of artists, will just not be needed, because there will be AI that will create works of art that will be more widely consumed and appreciated. And a lot of people would contest this and be like, well, AI doesn't, AI isn't human. It'll lack a human element in order for it to be appreciated and, consumed. I don't think this is a good argument at all. I think that there is already art AI that sells its work for thousands of dollars. And all the AI does is not. Oh, I think that this is a side note. This is important to say before I go through this point, that artists can use AI and can implement it into their artistic work. And there's a lot of wonderful examples of people using AI in order to create really profound works of art. I think of the David Byrne attached project that was made about pepper gas containers. I'm trying to remember what gallery it was for, but that sort of escapes me. Again, the AI isn't necessarily the problem. It's the people who program the AI to create these images that closely, as you know, emulate art that is already successful. So you get AI creating these images that are weird facsimiles of Renaissance art, of abstract art, which obviously already are very successful and cost millions of dollars on their own. But if you have a resource that can create these what a lot of people would consider beautiful works of art at no price, effectively, and no interrelation between the artist and the patron, you know, of course, no venture capitalist bro in their right mind, unless they have some weird artistic bent or stick up their ass, is going to want to interact with the artist anyway. So that's my fear. That's, I think, a very real possibility. I don't think this is something that is going to happen in 50 years, or, you know, I think this is something that if NFTs become extremely normalized, could probably happen within the next 5 years. You know, obviously, I'm spitballing right now. I don't have the numbers to back up a lot of what I'm saying, but this is my intuition from observing a lot of trends and artwork in the past couple of years, and a lot of what has actually been selling in the art world in the past couple of years. I think finally what I wish to talk about is what to do about this. I think a big thing will be legislation. I think that's the biggest thing you can do if you want to support artists and eliminate NFTs or eliminate their effect, is to create legislation that regulates those markets. I think the next thing you can do is create a environment that is incredibly inhospitable to those who support NFTs. And this process, surprising enough to me, is already sort of in effect, where people will quote unquote cancel people for using NFTs. And I think this is a completely wrong approach. I think instead of punishing artists for creating an NFT when they most likely are not informed on the environmental impacts or the wider cultural and artistic impacts of creating NFTs, I think that it is useless to try and hit them over a club and threatening canceling them. I think it's just going to create many toxic relationships between viewer base and the artists, and ultimately punishes the artists who are most at risk from this coming into effect. I think what rather we should do is politely, and emphasis on politely inform our favorite artists who create NFTs that of the dire effects of NFTs on the environment and the threat that they have to people's consumption of art and different artists around the world. And I think we have to dispel of the idea that NFTs are somehow the future of art. I uses an NFT to sell a work of art, that's no big deal. But if an artist uses NFTs as a means to promote an idea of techno-futurism, of any sort of futuristic aesthetic, then that's what we have to critique far more than whether or not they are using an NFT or not. So yeah, that's just a few thoughts that I had at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's rain pouring outside my window, and I hope you can hear it, and I hope you can hear the sound of the birds waking up with me. It's been a weird time to be alive, and it is hard to care about these things when there is so much injustice in the world. But I believe in people's power to realize, and the insidious nature of NFTs and how they profit off of people's indifference to them. I have a lot of empathy for those who are concerned about this and are threatened by their presence. I also have a lot of empathy for those who are taking on much larger social issues. I think that seeing protesting NFTs and protesting social justice as mutually exclusive is what those who are in power want us to believe. And we must not let them separate us. It is only through intersectionality that for anything to be done, because everything is connected.